And welcome, Sarah. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your knowledge and expertise with us this evening on invasive ecology.
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to be here. So I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay, well, here we go. So I've been introduced. So before we get started talking about invasion ecology, I would like to say why we do this. Why do we bother with the management of invasive species? You've probably been in meetings where you've heard someone say, oh, well, they just hate, they hate fill in the blank, wisteria, bittersweet, sawtooth oak. And the truth is that most of us don't hate these things, but we do love the biodiversity of our region, and we would like to keep as much of it intact as possible. And so a little example of that, many of you may recognize this wildflower. This is trout lily, yellow trout lily, and it is a very common wildflower in our region, native to floodplain forest. And you will see little carpets and patches of them on the floodplain forest floor each spring. And through this miracle of coevolution, there's even a particular little bee whose job it is to pollinate the trout lilies. He's called the trout lily andrina. So this is the little bee. And so it's not out of hate for, in this particular case, this plant here on the right, which is called lesser celandine. Lesser celandine forms extensive, and by extensive, I mean acres, extensive mats on the forest floor, especially floodplain forest floors, which crowd out all of our little spring ephemeral wildflowers. A lot of those wildflowers have specialist bees. There's nothing I said about the trout lily and that bee that you couldn't say about dozens or hundreds of other native species in our region. The picture on the right, I took this spring in Rock Creek Park. This is a patch of lesser celandine. There's not a budget to control all of it, so this patch is spreading, and it has killed all of the trout lilies in the area, except for the ones on the very edge where it has not advanced yet. So when I go back next spring, most likely this trout lily will be getting overrun and probably won't be there in 2 years. So that's why we do it. It's about the trout lily and the bee, not about some sort of hatred or malice toward lesser celandine. The Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management. There are PRISMs, as they're called, all over the country. Not every region has one, but they are a fairly common phenomenon. The National Capital PRISM consists of Washington, D.C. and every adjacent jurisdiction. We have 15 member organizations on the steering committee and a growing body of additional member organizations. These are just like a few logos that I was able to grab quickly and throw on a slide to give you an idea. We are national agencies, we are county agencies, we're federal agencies, and multiple conservation nonprofit organizations. We do a lot of things. We do training events for professionals. We do training events for volunteers. That's me there on the right, by the way. I know it's hard to recognize people these days. And the other 4 folks are Weed Warrior volunteers from the Potomac Appalachian Trail Club. We do weed removal events where you know, even though those people are from Prince George's County and those people are from Arlington County and somebody's from the federal government, and, you know, maybe you just live in the neighborhood, we're all going to get together and do some weed removal. And if you look in this picture in the area behind these people, you will see that there is no English ivy on that forest floor. It is in the bags. So let's spend the rest of our time together, and I will try to stop at like maybe 7:45 or 7:50, but I actually have no clock view. So somebody's gonna need to let me know that time is passing. But the two major topics we're going to look at is our invasion ecology, and then how can we turn this disaster in progress around? And we'll leave with some specific things that you can do to help turn this around. All right, so how alien species invade. One of the big ecology clues to how alien species invade are the actual characteristics of the species itself. So for example, if you have a type of oak tree, like a white oak or a southern red oak, the native oak trees in our area typically have to be 20 years old before they begin to produce acorns. The alien invasive oak tree, sawtooth oak, begins producing acorns at age 7. That's more than twice as fast. Invasive species which have the capacity to become invasive tend to have multiple means of reproduction. So that little yellow flower you saw a few slides ago, that was lesser celandine, that's a type of buttercup. Most buttercups just reproduce by flowering and then making seeds. But lesser celandine does that. Plus it has these underground tubers that if you go in and you try to pull a lesser celandine plant, the plant will break off and leave like 4, 5, 6 tubers in the ground. If there's a flood, it will disturb the floodplain soil, and some of those tubers will wash downstream. In addition to that, it has above ground tubers. It has like little tubers that it creates in the leaf axils. And one plant can create dozens of these little above ground tubers. So compared to our native buttercups, which have one method of reproduction, the invasive alien buttercup has 3 means of producing offspring. Species which can become invasive tend to have a lot of offspring. Species that don't have so many offspring each year are unlikely to become invasive. Species that become invasive tend to have long distance dispersal mechanisms. For example, like I said, that little tuber in the soil, the lesser celandine tuber, if that gets caught up in a flood, it can be transported hundreds of feet or even miles downstream in that watershed. Species that become invasive tend to be generalist. That means that, oh, here's a good one. Here's a good example. Norway maple is an invasive tree. It can grow in full sun. It can grow in part sun. It can grow in deep shade. It can grow in slightly acidic soils, neutral soils, and high pH soils. It can grow in moist soils. It can grow in dry soils. It can grow at all elevations. It doesn't have like some narrow set of conditions where it's happy. It's a generalist. And then there's a really interesting thing. And this, like all of these other things, if you sat down and thought about it, you might have figured them out. But this one is really interesting. Some species can alter the habitat that they're invading so that that habitat in the future favors their own species. Now, Norway maple is a really good example again, because what Norway maple does is it changes the amount of shade reaching the forest floor. that makes Norway maple seedlings more competitive than any native tree seedling can be in that new habitat. It also tends to kill all those wonderful spring wildflowers as well. So here's a photograph of Norway maple foliage. And so this is a good segue, because another thing that determines which alien species will become invasive is a phenomenon called predator release. And so the reason I'm showing you this picture is that you can see that the leaves of this Norway maple are in nearly perfect condition. There's almost no damage here. If you look at the leaves of sugar maple, actually for trees, both of these species do pretty well with a minimal level of damage, but Norway maple is like 1/10 as much damage as sugar maple. What this means in a practical sense is when you put them in a head-on competition for habitat, it just so happens that Norway maple loves sugar maple habitat. You put them in a head-to-head competition, and Norway maple is going to take over the sugar maple habitat. And that is what we see happening in our natural areas. Another really strange thing, and it took us a little while to figure this out, is that some alien species that are going to be invasive are invasive right out of the box. And it literally reminds you of the story of Pandora's box. I mean, she opens it and the plague and the pestilence and bam, it's like right out of the gate. There you go. And so a good example of an alien species that is invading very quickly is spotted lanternfly. It was only a few years ago that this thing was imported from China on some stone tiles in a quarry in Pennsylvania. And now it's in Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, Maryland, Virginia, and every place it goes, we try to contain it because this is going to be bad for ecosystems, but it's especially bad for farms. It's bad for farmers. The insects attack a lot of crops. They're really hard on vineyards and orchards. So some come out of the box right away. Then you have these other ones. And lesser celandine is an example of this. They invade very slowly. So lesser celandine was on the first ships from Europe. And so let's see. I know there were ships before 1482, but let's say 1482, 2021. So isn't that over 500 years? It's like 540 years, or that's a long time. So lesser celandine started spreading, I don't know, a decade or two ago, and it's going very fast. Now that it's going very fast. Yeah, so our little buttercup that, and imagine how confusing this is for people, because in their experience, they will have known this plant. It was brought over intentionally. It's a vegetable to eat, like spinach. It has medicinal properties. It was brought over intentionally. People know it's been here for hundreds of years. It has not been a problem. And all of a sudden you show up and start telling them it's invasive, right? It can't be invasive. That doesn't even make any sense, right? Very confusing. So what is that about? Why do some species show up and man, they're invasive, and then other species have this huge lag time? So there are some words that are used in invasion ecology a lot. Introduced, weed, escaped, naturalized, and invading. So in the house on the left, we have a happy little home, and someone has just planted an alien plant in the garden. The alien plant's just there. It's not causing any problems. And this is what we call an introduced plant. Now, at some point, the alien plant might start having offspring in the garden. You know, the rhizomes are spreading, the seeds are dispersing, whatever, and suddenly little baby alien plants are showing up. If the homeowner, the gardener, doesn't want those baby plants, then we call that a weed. This is actually a really pivotal moment, because the best predictor of whether or not an alien plant species will become invasive is its behavior in the garden. Most of our alien invasive plant species have been introduced through horticulture. And this is our first clue that we could be in trouble. We usually ignore this clue. So the next word is escaped. And what happens is that one of those little garden weeds hops over the happy picket fence into an unmaintained area. It has literally escaped the garden. And it could be in a natural area. You know, maybe this is a native meadow. And if it continues to spread, so this is a different situation. There's nobody weeds this garden. No one fertilizes it. No one comes and sprays horticultural oil when there are aphids or plant diseases, right? So this is a test. Can you survive in the wild? Escaping is a test. And if they do pass the test and continue to spread, then we refer to them as naturalized. Now, one of the problems here is that things can escape or naturalize in some places and not others. So this process that's happening is not necessarily homogeneous across multiple states. So again, what will happen here is some people will start saying, oh, that plant, fill in the blank, is invasive. And other people know for a fact that they have it in their garden and it's not even weedy, it doesn't spread. And so then what they think when they hear that is that you're wrong. Okay, you're far off to one end of environmentalism and you think everything is invasive, when in fact, you could be taking in a completely different set of facts than the other person is. So if naturalization continues, then at some point where perceptible damage is being done, either there's so much harm to the ecosystem or so much harm to horticulture or agriculture that we're reaching a consensus that we have a problem, we start calling that species invasive. And we have a curve to express this. It's called the invasion curve. And it expresses fairly concisely the way that we can make a lot of progress in turning this rather troublesome ship around. And so what we have here on the x-axis is time, and the y-axis is the area infested. So the area infested is expressed by this yellow to red curve. And then we have a parallel y-axis, which is control costs. So obviously, the bigger the infestation gets, the more it costs to control. The control costs are expressed by these bars. This is a bar graph in the background. All right, so as the area increases, the cost of control increases. So down here on this x-axis, which is time, we've got this blue arrow, introduction. The best thing, the most cost-effective thing, the least ecologically damaging thing is prevention. So in the example of the spotted lanternfly, you know, if we bought tiles that were made in the mid-Atlantic, we never would have imported the Chinese tiles that had the eggs on them. That would be an option for prevention. There might be other options like managing the shipping in some way that would have prevented the eggs from surviving the trip, right? But there are all of these different things. the little homeowner that planted that alien plant, if someone had screened those alien plants with a series of questions and then not offered the homeowner that particular choice, that would have been prevention. If it's a garden favorite, this alien plant, and this is actually starting to happen, plant breeders are beginning to breed sterile cultivars of alien garden favorites. That's a form of prevention. So prevention has a cost. You see the little blue box, there is a cost, but it is far and away the most affordable approach. But once the cat is out of the bag or the little plant has hopped the picket fence, then you're into this territory over here, which is like whack-a-mole. Can you eradicate all the little things that escape? And part of that is how early can you detect them? So if you imagine this, maybe this little garden plant has only escaped from 100 yards or even 1,000 yards. How many eyes would we have to have on the ground to have a reasonably good chance of seeing that that thing is escaping? It's a lot of eyes, right? So it's really hard to catch anything down here on the left end of the curve. If you can catch it that early, you have a really good chance of stopping the invasion process dead in its tracks. You save untold ecological damage, and you save the taxpayers millions of dollars if you can pull off this eradication thing. This is what we want to start doing with a program called Invader Detectives. So once enough of it has hopped over the fence and it's starting to invade areas and it's getting spread, like for example, the spotted lanternfly right now, I literally just got an email in the last hour. We have confirmed populations in Harper's Ferry. So we can add West Virginia to the list of states. At that point, you're talking about containment. You've got basically a big hot forest fire and it's shooting off embers in all directions. And you've got crews running in all directions, county governments, state governments, federal responses, trying to put out all of the embers that are floating off of this massive fire, right? Because each ember that gets away is going to start another massive forest fire. That's containment. The core of the problem we have is that usually the public is unaware there's a problem until that's going on. Big issue, right? So we need public awareness to happen earlier on the curve, and intense response efforts to happen earlier on the curve. If containment does not work, then you are looking at long-term management. And that can be something like saying, okay, well, in this park, which is in the process of being overrun by lesser celandine, the most ecologically diverse, important spots we have with the most rare species are so many square feet or so many acres. And we are going to protect those. And we are going to let the whole rest of the park or county or fill in the blank, whatever your area is that you manage, we're going to let the whole rest of it get invaded. There's actually a really good reason for that strategy that can result in the long-term conservation of biodiversity. That's a whole nother talk. But that is the really more the desperate position that you don't want to get into. So what we're doing is trying to implement a concept that comes from the National Invasive Species Council. This is a pilot program called Invader Detectives. And the concept is that citizen science use their smartphone apps to go out and look for these early detection, rapid response opportunities. So in a lot of cases, we have some idea what might be coming our way. And so we can train citizen scientists to actually go out and look for those. And then we can plug those citizen scientists into regional land management agencies through their regional PRISM. So that would be us. So we would be the conduit between the citizen scientists and our, 15 plus member agencies. The result of this could be that we would be taking action earlier on the invasion curve than we are right now, preventing these crises and saving a whole lot of money. So the program, Invader Detectives, consists of, all right, I have this little bar on my screen that's like blocking my view. There, I was able, I'm like, if I move it, I could shut down the presentation. I have to be very careful. So there are three major components to being an invader detective. One is to just take your smartphone out and start making observations of everything. And there are a number of apps you can use to do this. And if you're already using one of them, and you like it, then just keep using that app. That's awesome. The app that is really easy to use and that most people really enjoy using is Inaturalist. Also, we would suggest that people, like members of the Natural History Society, we all have our little areas of interest. Like for me, it's plants. For some people, it's bees. I have a friend that just like goes out and watches dragonflies all summer long. That is her passion. So we would encourage you to just continue going out and observing whatever it is you love to observe, but to start making more observations of things that you haven't seen before. Because remember, we're looking for that new thing. All right, so if you're using Inaturalist, here is how to make a report. If you're already using Inaturalist, you might want to take like a 3-minute break, go get a drink. But for those of you that have not used it yet, this is how easy it is. And you can make an entire observation record like in 3 minutes or even less. It's really, really fast. So these are screenshots from my cell phone. So you're looking at my account, and that's my username. I'm Sara _Tangren. I've made 61 observations so far, and here is a list of my observations. The red boxes are kind of cool, and one of the things I like about this platform is it has a strong social media component. These red boxes indicate that people are interacting with me about observations I made. What I want you to pay attention to is down here at the bottom. These are some actions I can take, and the action we're talking about right now is observe. So at this point, you've downloaded your app, you've logged in, and you are going to click the observe button, which takes you to the middle screen. Now, all of this stuff is grayed out because that's not what I'm doing. I'm down here with actions that I can take to make an observation. I can take a picture with my phone. I can withdraw a picture from my photograph library, and I can record a sound. So with this app, you can report like frogs and crickets and things, or birds that you've only identified by sound. The next, if you hit camera, which is what I did, the next thing your phone will do is tell you that this software is asking for permission to use your camera. You need to say yes. Then you take your picture. And so this is my picture, which is stupid because it's a picture of my laptop. You would take a picture of like a living thing, right? And then your phone will ask you if it may use your current location. And my preference for an answer is allow while using app. And then this is the last screen. You are literally almost done because you used your phone camera to get the picture. It has the picture. And you used your phone to provide the GPS. It has the location of your observation and the time. You didn't have to fill any of that out. At this point, if you want to, you can ask the artificial intelligence to make a suggestion about what you saw. This is A, very, very useful. B, causes a lot of mistakes. And 3, incredibly important. And we don't really have time to go into all of that, but one thing I want you to know right now is that sometimes the suggestion this thing makes is wrong. So if you're looking at what it's suggesting and you're going like, I don't know, it could like maybe a third of the time to a half of the time, the suggestion is wrong. So if it's suggesting that you saw a particular kind of grass and you're like, yeah, I don't think it's, I know that grass and I don't think this is that grass, then tell it that you saw grass. It's okay to go up to a higher taxonomic level where you feel like you're on firm ground. The problem with telling it that it's right when it's wrong is that it is trying to learn from you. It is learning how to get better machine recognition, which is where this gets incredible, but is the topic for another talk. Please always check the captive cultivated button. Captive means it's in someone's garden, or yeah, captive and cultivated. It means it's in someone's garden, someone's taking care of it. Not captive means it's a wild plant. People forget to check off this button. And then the other thing I'd say is really important to do here is to leave some notes, because people actually are using the observations that you make, and the notes are really helpful. Within about 1 minute, if you have a decent phone signal, you will be able to go to the map page, the explore button, and actually see your observation pop up on the map. And it will also, if you search for the species or for whatever taxon you entered, you will see reports that people are making on that, including your report. So I want to talk for a minute or two about this program, this Invader Detectives program. It can't just be people out there alone with no support, you know, clicking pictures, right? In order to make this thing where we're preventing ecological disasters and saving taxpayer dollars happen, we're going to want to have a community. And Inaturalist itself actually provides a lot of the social component for community. So what we will have, and we actually do have a project page. We have 2 prototypes right now, and we're going to pick one of them, and I can let you all know about the project page shortly. Then the project page is used for, so all of these member organizations have something that they want the invader detectives to know about, like a new potentially invasive species, like an alert, right? They will post that on the project page. So it's a way for the organization to communicate to the members. Then the members can communicate with each other by visiting their member pages. Like now, you know, my username is Sara_Tangren. Once you have an account, you can go to my member page and start blowing me up with all kinds of messages. And then the other way the community communicates on the Inaturalist website is with the observations. So you can go in and look at other people's observations, and they will come and look at your observations, and it starts conversations. But the thing that's missing from that, I mean, that's pretty good amount of what social media is supposed to cover. The thing that is missing is some sort of listserv, which is where one invader detective could go and make some comments in an email and then share that with all the other invader detectives. So we're going to have a listserv in addition to the Invader Detectives project page. And we want to have some quarterly events, like maybe we pick a site and we all go out there. I mean, not like mandatory, not like you have to go, but for fun, we all go out and we have, these are the things at this site that we don't recognize, BioBlitz, right? So like a special kind of BioBlitz, or have winter annual meetings. And I think we could have the parks departments and other land management agencies come and tell us how they use this information to actually protect ecosystems and stop invasions. And I hear stories like that because I'm the coordinator of this group. I already know stories like that. And I think other people would probably like to hear stories like that too. And of course, we would always have ongoing trainings. Then the third invader detective activity would be just, you know, when National Capital PRISM issues an alert. For example, we are probably going to issue an alert for Amur cork tree that you see on the screenshot of my phone. Just train your eyes to recognize that as best you can. And when you go out in the field, if you see something that has a tree with a compound leaf and you don't know what it is, start snapping shots of anything that you don't know what it is until you've got your eyes trained for what an Amur cork tree might look like. And so I think, yes, watch out for alert species. So Amur cork trees. Another one that's very interesting that's going on right now is Cuban tree frogs. Topic for another day. And water chestnut. So there's this very strange species that's taking over ponds. There's a good chance that it's going to escape and get into the Potomac and the Bay. And it's bad. It's really, really bad. Then the last activity would be that in the social media component where you can go and communicate with other people about their observations is to help them know whether or not their observation is correctly identified. And that process is called verifying reports. And this Invader Detectives program is going to generate hundreds and thousands of reports that require verification. So there's going to be a lot of that work to do. So that's it. And I wanted to point out that a lot of the photographs that I used in this presentation were from citizen scientists who agreed to share photographs on iNaturalist. If any of you are interested, you can actually just go do this on iNaturalist, make your observations, and we will still be able to see your observations even if you don't join the project. But if you think you might like to be an official invader detective and be part of this National Capital PRISM community and this particular effort, send me an email. There I am, sara.tangren@dc.gov. The DC Department of Environment is the host organization for the coordinator. So sara.tangren@dc.gov. So I think we have a little bit of time for questions, right, Bronwyn?
We do. We can you stop sharing and we can all come back together?
Yep.
All right. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for Sara? Mary says that she loves iNaturalist and Seek. Are you familiar with Seek, Sara? I think that's one that was made for kids.
Yeah.
So,
I got
Mary, go ahead.
so Seek, what that is you can use your phone's camera and just like go to the Seek app and not even like take a picture. So with the iNaturalist app, you have to take a picture and then it suggests uh, uh, identification for it. With the Seek app, you don't even have to snap a picture. You just open it up and you point it at this, like, let's say there's a bird, you point it at a bird and it will try to identify it right then and there.
Mary, have you ever watched Star Trek?
I have. My dad is a huge Trekkie. Both my parents are. My dad more so. So my name is actually Nerys. It's not Nerys, after Major Kira Nerys in Deep Space Nine.
Oh, cool.
Yep.
So the Seek app reminds me of the tricorder.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know if I have my I don't know if I have my name as Mary or as my middle name is Nerys.
Yeah, we
That's
should
why I
have,
thought you
we should definitely have the whole name here, Mary. I think that would help.
Um,
Mary Nerys.
yes.
So I mentioned before about the artificial intelligence component of invader detectives, and that's part of this big miracle. And since Mary is bringing it up, once we train the software to accurately identify plants, and that is one of the missions of this app, is training software, bad pictures, funny angles, pictures of compound leaves with no fruit, no flowers. And this app is getting it right a lot of the time. And every time we are accurate in letting the app know whether or not it made the right guess, it gets better. This is a precursor to having machines that can remove invasive species for us. So that's not where we are today, although we do actually have robots that control weeds in agricultural fields. And the California Department of Transportation has a machine that controls weeds on roadsides. So it's not as, there are drones that can report illegal crops, shall we say, right? So it's not way off in the future. And we are contributing towards that with this effort.
I also want to comment. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mary.
I comment two things related to iNaturalist. One, the Seek app. I don't know if it's by iNaturalist, but you can have it linked up to iNaturalist. So you can be like, oh, look, a butterfly or a flower. And then you use the Seek app it will try to do its best to identify it. And sometimes it doesn't identify species. Sometimes it says the closest we can get is we think it's in this family. And then you straight from the app, you can post it onto iNaturalist, as opposed to like, okay, well now I use this app and now I have to go into that app. And so that's the first thing I want to mention. The second thing is, let's say you have a flower in your yard and you take a picture of it and upload it to iNaturalist. Well, you might not want your house coordinates to be on iNaturalist. There's a setting called geo privacy, and you can set it to open, which will give the exact location of where that photo is taken. Or you can do obscured, which would put it like it kind of just this ring and says it's in this area. I'm not telling you exactly where. Right. Or you could just have it with no location at all, which is not recommended because, you know, the location is a very important part of the data.
Right.
Also, this was a wonderful presentation.
Oh, thank you, Mary.
You're welcome.
We have a couple of questions, Sarah, also. Doris wants to know, how do you eliminate lesser celandine when the tubers simply spread when you disturb them?
Yeah, so lesser celandine is a good example of an invasive plant that can be removed by hand if there's a very small infestation. Otherwise, you're looking at chemical alternatives. Ultimately, it looks like we have missed the boat on early detection, eradication, and containment. This one is probably going to spread all across the appropriate climate zones in North America, which is going to be huge. So this is going to be really devastating. So the next thing that we try to do at that point is to make the spread as slow as possible so that as much biodiversity is protected in areas which are not invested yet as possible, while we're doing the research on the most effective control methods, and fund scientists to develop biocontrols. Biocontrol is not always going to be an option. We're getting ourselves up against the wall here because a biocontrol has to not hurt our native buttercups, right? There are going to be times when we do this research and they're going to say, we went to Asia and every single pest and pathogen that we could potentially bring back also hurts native buttercups. So there is no, or a crop, some crop plant, you know, some economically important plant. Right now, we're so frequently pushed up against the wall and we're saying there's going to have to be a biocontrol. We need to be aware that's not always going to be an option. We have to walk this back down to prevention and early detection, rapid response.
That brings me to my question, Sarah, and it kind of, Shireen, it echoes what Shireen was. I really liked that graph that you showed us, the curve. And can you give us any examples of successful eradication projects that have happened in that area, in Maryland or in the area, or it doesn't have to be Maryland, but if in Maryland, that would be great.
Yeah, so this is a question that I have had also. There are not a lot of examples, but one example is that there was an infestation of zebra mussels in a lake in Virginia, and the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources was able, and it takes years, to eradicate the zebra mussels from the lake before the zebra mussels were inadvertently transported to any other lakes. There was a similar event in Maryland with zebra mussels as well. And also in Maryland, we successfully eradicated 4 or 5 populations of an aquatic invasive plant known as water chestnut. And it's, if you go up into New England, they're still fighting it. They're still running around trying to put out all the little embers from the forest fire. They think they might be able to do it, but they have many little embers to put out up there. But the Maryland Department of Natural Resources deserves a lot of credit. They worked very hard, and they did that.
Thank you. Shireen wanted to know, what are some of the eradication techniques that are used?
Well, the eradication techniques, so the techniques like manual control, chemical control, that sort of thing are the same that we use to control species that we know, you know, they're out of Pandora's box and we're never going to get them back in. But there are strategies, right? So one of the strategies, and this is where invader detectives would be super important, is to know where the invasion front is. So, and this is where it starts to get like military, right? You start talking about strategies and invasion fronts. But if you do think about the military, you know, the battles that happened decades and centuries past, they literally did not know where their enemy was. And how do you defend yourself or protect biodiversity in our case, when you don't know where the opposition is located? Where are their encampments? But if we know the outermost reach, and that's defined by the invasion front, if we know the outermost reach of where the invasive has established so far, then we surround it. And we actually work our way in until we cut it off.
May I ask a question? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful presentation, Sarah. I'm glad to be able to listen, enjoyed it very much. I have a bit of a pessimistic question, so you could even, ignore it. But I am a bit afraid about whether some of these changes in the success of the invasive species has to do with the strains on many ecosystems here. So they were actually arriving before, but according to more healthy ecosystem situation, then they could not establish. And what we see here is maybe a fight where they are part of the symptoms rather than and probably part of the cause as well, but they are difficult to disentangle. I wonder, what do you think about those possibilities? Thank you.
Toby, I think you're absolutely right. So some of the other things that are going on right now in terms of how humans treat the environment include climate change, include landscape disturbances, include continued introduction of alien species. And it's, you can't take really any environmental issue and look at it. I did say climate change, didn't I?
Mm-hmm.
I would hope
Yes.
so.
Yes.
Yeah, you cannot take any one of those things and look at it in isolation. For example, invasive species are causing more frequent fires. A lot of these devastating fires that you hear about across the Western United States are not just facilitated by climate change. They are very much facilitated by an invasive species called cheatgrass. Cheatgrass is green in the spring, and by summer it is brown, and it is extremely flammable, and it's everywhere, and it covers acres, and it's just like tinder for a fire. Any little spark from a passing train or a car or a lawnmower or a cigarette butt, and acres go up like that. And that provides the fuel to burn homes and burn forest, which makes climate change worse, because all of that carbon that was successfully sequestered and the plant material is going up into the atmosphere. So we've got, ironically, what are called positive feedback loops. And they're not positive at all. They're horrible. We've got horrible feedback loops. So yes, in order to tackle invasive species, we need to think more holistically than we do right now.
Thank you. Cecilia wanted to know, and this is often a question I get if I'm out maybe at Cromwell Valley Park doing the weed warrioring out there. Try to say that 10 times, or try to say it once. I can't. Once some people tell her, why bother clearing the invasives in an area? They'll just come back, or they'll just show up in another area.
Right.
It can seem futile. What do you tell folks who might get those kind of comments?
So first I tell them that my aunt's name is Cecilia. But then after that, okay, so there's a popular misperception that if we do nothing about invasives, and I'm going to talk about plants now because that's what I know best. If we do nothing about invasive plants, for example, that, an alien oak will displace the native oaks, and some alien wildflowers will displace the native wildflowers, and, some alien bees fit into that slot, etc. And that is not, there is no sound ecological science-based reason to think that we are just going to switch the players out and still have some sort of a functioning ecosystem. What we see instead is that you will have invasive trees like tree of heaven establish over acres and miles, establish huge monocultures and all of the habitat that is appropriate for it. Norway maple is establishing huge monocultures in Western Maryland that cover entire mountains. So what's going to happen when we introduce an alien species that did not come from the place where Norway maple co-evolved? Okay, an alien plant pathogen that did not come from Norway and is not present in North America, but we keep just importing things like tiles and alien plants and dirty shoes from tourist feet, and we keep doing that. Eventually, we will import a pathogen that will kill the Norway maple. And then the native trees are gone and the alien trees are gone. And the invasive vines will just take over the mountains. So we're not talking about not having the tree that we like best in the forest. We're talking about losing the forest. And you can see that particularly well in the case of invasive vines, because invasive vines kill forest. And bringing us back to climate change, when they kill the trees in the forest, all those trees are releasing their carbon back into the atmosphere.
We have a question about Japanese stiltgrass. Is Maryland trying to control it? And if so, what's going on with that?
There are people in Maryland who are advocating to get research to develop a biocontrol for Japanese stiltgrass funded. So if you would like, because we're against the wall there again, right? And that is something where we detected it early. We know what happened. We know what was shipped into the United States. We know where the shipment was made, and then people watched it expand outwards from that point. At any point, someone could have mounted a rapid response. So we need to get rapid response funded so that we can prevent the next stiltgrass. But now that we're stuck with this stiltgrass, this invasive grass, the only alternative we have left is a biocontrol. And of course, that means the government has to fund it. So we have to encourage governments to pony up the money to fund the research to find the biocontrol.
And for those of you who don't know, can you just give a quick overview on what Japanese stiltgrass is and what the problem is?
Sure. So Japanese stiltgrass is an alien annual grass. Okay, sorry. Am I getting quiet? So Japanese stiltgrass is an
I think she was just saying that you needed to say we need the government to pony up to help.
Yes. Come on, help us out here. Yes, so it's an alien annual grass that it establishes huge monocultures. And anywhere there's moisture, anywhere there's disturbance into an ecosystem, it just goes in and it chokes out anything that is shorter than it is. Now, this is the problem, because when I say that, you might think, oh, well, the trees will be okay. But remember, the forest cycle is that when the mature trees die, the little baby trees come from seeds and grow up and take their place. Little baby trees are killed by stiltgrass. Okay, so again, this little annual grass could keep forest from regenerating. So we're losing our wildflowers, our native grasses, our native sedges, and forest. It's a very bad situation. It has, in my lifetime, wiped out more biodiversity than anything else I've seen so far. I think wavy leaf basket grass is going to turn out to be worse.
Do we have any other questions for Sara while we have her here? Take advantage of her brain. Pickett? One thing is, this is kind of a good follow-up because next week it's all about the American chestnut tree, and that was a fungus, the chestnut blight, that was introduced, and it wiped out the forest. I don't know, Sara, do you want to give us a preview of that, even though you're not the presenter?
No, absolutely, and I'm very excited about that research, and I've read the research papers, and from what I see, it looks like, okay, so this is an example of making cultivars out of a native plant. So that's a whole nother topic for another day, but this is the way I would love to see that done. So they're doing it to be helpful to ecosystems with ecosystems in mind, and in a way that should actually help to preserve some of the biodiversity of those we have little surviving chestnut trees all around the region. And they, a few of them survive to be old enough to flower and produce a few fruits before they die. So those are the most resistant ones we have left in the wild, and they're protected by law. These introduced resistant, genetically modified cultivars of this native plant, American chestnut, will be deployed in a way to maximize their opportunity to cross-pollinate with our remaining wild plants. So I'm very excited about it. The only thing that concerns me, so the American chestnut's part of a system, right? It's part of an ecosystem. It has plant pathogens, native plant pathogens, not this alien thing. And it had, you know, caterpillars, moths, butterflies, beetles that kept it in check. And so my question would be, and I plan on coming, is that system still there? Because if we create this thing and the system that keeps it in check is gone, it will actually experience predator release, just like alien plants do, even though it's a native plant. We see that now with our white-tailed deer. That's a native animal, but the predator is missing. So the native wild white-tailed deer seems like an invasive animal because it is experiencing predator release.
Everything is connected. You can't pull one part of the universe without it all coming together. One last question from Shireen. Has biocontrol been tried on invasive plants with any success? We're looking forward to end on a success story.
Yes. Okay, so I should have thought of that question in advance, but there are biocontrols that have been released for purple loosestrife that are successful. And there are biocontrols that have been released for mile a minute, which are really cool. They're little weevils. So I don't know how many of you remember the mile a minute used to go like 15, 20 feet up into the trees. So all around the tree line, and it was awful to pull and it would scratch you all up. And it was just nasty. But with the biocontrol, typically now it's 2 or 3 feet. And you go and you look at those little triangle leaves, and there are holes all through the leaves, and those are the weevils. So it hasn't eradicated mile a minute, but it has made mile a minute more like a component of the ecosystem.
All right, well, it looks like we have our work cut out for us. Sarah,
ma'am.
and I hope that we have folks to join the army of defenders. Get their cell phones out and stop scrolling and start getting some photographs and helping to understand and where our invasives are so we can stop them before they jump over the picket fence, as you said.
Thank you, Bronwyn. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. And if we don't see you, hopefully we'll see you at Shark Fest. Remember to buy your tickets beforehand. And we have the American Chestnut presentation next Thursday for Must Learn Thursday. So I hope that we'll see you back here to learn some more. Get that curiosity muscle, all, exercise it. So take care, stay well, stay outside, stay curious.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome.